And joining us now is Richard Haass, the President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations. So nothing is done till it's done. But, Richard, from all of my sources, this is going to be announced by the Qataris. As you can understand, diplomatically, the Israelis and the U.S. have agreed that Qatar should announce it first. They were the host for the talks. They were the go-between with Hamas, these indirect talks that have been going on, for so many months. I can report that William Burns, the CIA director, has been in Washington this week, but that he made 19 trips on this subject to the region, as well as meetings that were held elsewhere in Europe and elsewhere. But 19 trips just since October 7th, when the hostages were taken. We know that Secretary of State Blinken made 13 trips, and all of these trips involved multiple countries. 13 missions with Secretary Blinken. I was on many of them, where he would go to 7 or 8 countries on one of those trips, all around the region, trying to put things together, and also trying to work on what would happen after this deal, what would happen to try to rebuild Gaza, to try to create a Palestinian entity to lead Gaza, to try to end an Israeli occupation, which would be ended for all intents and purposes, except for that border area, the border buffer, and the border area near the Philadelphia corridor near Egypt and Rafah. Richard, this is an enormous deal. There's been an enormous amount of work done on it, and a big factor acknowledged by Secretary Blinken to me just this week was the terrific work in the last couple of days of Steve Witkoff, the new Trump Middle East negotiator, the envoy who is going to be coming in, and he went to Doha, and the fact that starting on December 2nd, Donald Trump said on Truth Social, and then repeated it a week ago Tuesday at his news conference, that marathon news conference, that to Hamas, that they would be held to pay in the Middle East if they didn't do this deal before he's sworn in. So they might just make that deadline if these hostages start coming out on Sunday, over the weekend. Richard?
Yeah, Andrew, let me say 3 things. First, obviously, this is welcome. The hostages have it's been a nightmare for them, for their families, for the entire country of Israel, for people in this country who are focused on it. So a sigh of relief that hopefully this is the beginning of the end of that ordeal. Secondly, it's interesting that it happened now. Why now as opposed to any time over the last 15 months? And I think there's multiple things at work here. One, as you mentioned, the Trump administration, the pressure they were putting on, that clearly had its effect mostly in Israel. I would think between Mr. Witkoff, that will be the Trump envoy, but the Israeli government clearly wanted to get off on a good foot with Donald Trump. Donald Trump wanted this somewhat be off the agenda. I think what mattered more on the Hamas side was not the threats. There's really nothing to say they'll be held to pay. Well, the Gazans have already been to hell and back, or actually they're still there. The Israelis have been bouncing the rubble. No, I think there it has to do much more with Iran's weakness and, above all, Hezbollah's weakness. When Hezbollah a few months ago signaled that it would sign a ceasefire with Israel and no longer link it to this, I think that left Hamas much more exposed. The fall of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. The entire region has moved against Iran, against Hamas. I think that had a lot to do with it. And then thirdly, yes, this is significant, and I don't want to in any way belittle it, but coming back to a phrase I use in terms of diplomacy, this might be the end of the beginning, in the sense that there's a lot to come. As significant as this is, as difficult as it is, as much time as it took from Bill Burns and Tony Blinken, and again, without diminishing all the effort, we still have other phases of this ceasefire to come. We've got the larger question of governance and security in Gaza, and then you've got the incomparably larger question of hopefully Israel's relationship with the Palestinians in the West Bank, where you've got roughly 3 million Palestinians there. So this is a day, hopefully if it all holds, and I think it's likely to, it's a day to feel relief, maybe even some celebration, but also with a sober awareness of the extraordinarily difficult decisions and challenges to come.
And we should also point out on this timeline, the timeline as explained to me by people involved in the talks from all 3 sides, not the Hamas side, obviously, is that once the deal is announced, once Qatar is satisfied that all the branches of Hamas have accepted it, which we're told has happened today, that means that Israel will then trigger its security cabinet meeting, then its full cabinet meeting. Then there is what may be a very quick referral to the Israeli Supreme Court, which has to give some number of hours for a potential appeal. That, I think, can be accelerated. Then the deal would go into effect. So it could take a day or so to get all of the Israeli pieces in place. And then the deal goes into effect. Once that happens, there is a 48-hour window to see if it holds and to make all the arrangements to actually physically move the hostages out of where they are in Gaza. And then the beginning of the hostages release. So, and that would happen in phases. This is all in phase 1 of the 6-week deal. The first phase is 6 weeks, and that the hostages would be released in priority of those who are wounded, the women, first of all, and those who are wounded, the elderly, children, and then, at the end of that process would come the remains that people are grieving to have, including a number of American families who are very well aware that their hostages have not survived this ordeal. Richard?
Andrew, what's also interesting is how both Hamas and Israel compromised to some extent.
Right.
Israel basically said its goal was to eliminate Hamas. Well, Hamas has not been eliminated. They've accepted a ceasefire. Hamas is compromised too. Israel is not 100% out of Gaza. This is not a permanent end, quote unquote, to the occupation. So again, I think it shows that both sides have moved. When you put your finger on what I think is going to be very interesting, the internal debate in Israel. As you know better than anybody, several members of the current governing coalition opposed this deal. The far-right finance minister, the security minister. So the question is, what do Israeli politics look like in 2 or 3 days? People not in the governing coalition said they'll support the government on this issue. But what then? What does Bibi Netanyahu have in 2 or 3 days? Is this simply something he works through? Or is this actually something of a challenge to his government? And I think that will be a really interesting space to watch, because that will obviously have implications for domestic and international policy, foreign policy for Israel going forward.